problem that I have is the providing network is so small and limited that based on the percentages of kids who've been identified and diagnosed with special ed, which is various stages, based on the provider community that can provide that service, it's a huge gap. I may have 3 to 5 programs in my portfolio of 150 that can provide that service, and they're very expensive. Their cost model is 30 or 40% higher than what I average get. The problem is not the money. The problem for me is to provide a network that doesn't focus on because you have to have certain levels of expertise in the field. But let's be honest. If you take a look at the percentages of kids who've been diagnosed, who have an IEP and all that, we don't have a provider network to provide those kids unless they're at level 4. Then they get subsidized support. And so we got to look at that in a way. And the scary thing now, if you don't have this in St. Louis, is the high school test, graduation test. And those kids are now getting certificates of attendance in a lot of cities where they're not actually getting a real high school diploma. So we got to take a look at how we treat those kids and how we mainstream. But that's a political. And the one thing about parents who have kids, they're very active. Most active kids most active parents, you talking about, they will put the phone up and call me and say, you don't have a summer program for my kid. And so I think I think there's an area of expertise that we need to bring into after school. And I'm assuming that you may even know people who will be involved in that. That's something that we got to really start looking at. And if you look at jail, guess what? Who's in jail? Reading levels 3rd grade and below and special ed placement in jail. So think about it. School to prison pipeline is huge for special ed kids.
The final part of Betty's question is about when there are no school sites in the neighborhood. Come on, Betty.
Okay, well, many times children go to schools that aren't walking distance. They're not able to stay at that school. So how do you partner with other organizations to make sure that there's space and that it's accessible? And it allows for engagement in the community and the neighborhood when it's in their neighborhood.
Let me answer that for the After School for All partnership, because our strategy around the After School for All partnership is we need to have a mix. Some that are in schools, some that are in community-based settings, and that way we don't miss the kids. If they come home, they can go to the community-based setting. They don't have to stay in the school. In places, we also know that we need to deal with transportation issues for after school. Believe me, if I had the answer to that, I wouldn't be sitting here today. But that's a critical one too, just across the board. But right now, the way we're set up is to try to do the best we can to have a mix and to continue that diversity of locations so that kids have an array in their neighborhood that they can attach.
I have let me talk about. And we've been doing charter schools for the longest of probably anybody in the country around. We have vouchers, we have charter schools. Let me tell you what's happening with this issue. The mobility now is huge because of the charter and the voucher. So the mobility is big. So kids are moving around. The issue is this. The neighborhood beats, and I'll use their terminology. You can use gangs, you can use... young people now have a map, a Google map of where they can go and where they can't go. And so what happens in after school, kids are crossing what they call game territory. And so now we got to reconfigure, because what happens is within the realm of school choice, kids are moving into charters, public schools are closing. That means that the schools that are left open, the kids are traveling in territories they never had to terror. So, like, for example, we know that we have a charter school, Thurgood Marshall, and a public school, Anacostia High School. At 3:30, it's a war zone at the subway. The Thurgood Marshall kids are coming from all over the city. The Anacostia kids are right there. So they go to war. I mean, we've had fights, stabbings, and so we really got to look at, even though you are an adult, you don't look at that. Like, you just hit that number in your car, I'll go here, I'm going to drive here, I'm going to park here, I'm going to go here. Kids have a whole understanding about territoriality. Personally, I hate it, but it's a reality. We got to deal with that. So in after school, we got to understand that maybe kids can't go because in the